Hello and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you a custom recipe that I came up with that the three main ingredients are chicken, broccoli, and mushrooms. You can wind up swapping out some of these other ingredients if they're not up to a personal preference, but these are what I'm using. For what I'm going to be starting off with, I'm using 2 chicken breasts, but if you want to use another cut of chicken you can. As for the vegetables, I'm going to be using broccoli, mushrooms, some shallots, ginger, and mukimame. As for the seasonings, I'm going to be using soy sauce, MSG, gochugaru, which is Korean red pepper, rice vinegar, some form of sweet chili sauce, and hoisin sauce. If you don't have hoisin sauce on hand, you can wind up using oyster sauce as a substitute. I'm starting with the vegetable prep first, that way I don't have to clean the cutting board more times than I need to. Now, these mushrooms are already sliced up, but I'm just going to dice them up a little bit further, that way I can get a little bit more of a finer texture with the mushrooms. Next, I skinned and diced one of the shallots that I had. Chances are you can get away with using one, as shallots have a milder flavor, so you don't need to add as many. If you don't have any shallots on hand, you can use onions as well. Just for this dish, I prefer to use shallots. Next, I'm going to take the raw ginger and cut a small knob off of it, and then I'm going to dice that up. If you aren't a fan of raw ginger or ginger in general, you can substitute this out for raw garlic or garlic powder. Next, I'm going to prep the broccoli crowns and cut off the heads of the crowns. When it's time to prep the chicken, you want to dice them up and try and keep them in as close to uniform sizes as possible. Now, this is really personal preference here, but if you like larger chunks, go with larger chunks. If you like smaller chunks, go with smaller chunks. But overall, you just want to try and keep them as universal as possible. As for the seasonings, you're going to use 1 tablespoon of the gochugaru, 1/8 of a teaspoon of MSG, 2 to 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, one tablespoon of rice vinegar, two to 3 tablespoons of sweet chili sauce, and then 2 to 3 tablespoons of hoisin sauce. After combining all the seasonings, put in the container and shake or stir, and then afterwards set in the fridge to marinate for a minimum of 30 minutes, but upwards to a couple hours. If you're in a pinch and you just want to eat after you got home from work, you can wind up throwing all these together and just immediately throwing it in a skillet, but preferably give it time to marinate. In a pan on high heat, add oil and then add the chicken. After you add the chicken to the pan, give it a little bit of a stir, that way it can get coated in some of that oil, and that way it's going to prevent it from actually sticking to the bottom of the pan. After giving it a little bit of a stir, leave uncovered for around 2 to 3 minutes so it can get a little bit of a sear, and then cover with the lid. After you cover it with the lid, the total cooking time is going to run around 10 minutes, so you're just going to want to leave it covered and stir it occasionally so that way it's just not actually going to stick to the bottom of the pan and form too much of a crust. After around 10 minutes, reduce heat and add a little bit of water to deglaze the pan. Now I'm going to be adding the broccoli crowns. I'm adding these before the mushrooms and everything else, just that way it's giving the broccoli crowns a little bit of time to soften up. After adding all of them, give them a little bit of a stir and incorporate them into the chicken. Cover them with a lid and then leave them to cook for around 5 minutes. Here, I'm adding a little bit more of the sweet chili sauce and some soy sauce. This step isn't necessary, but for me, I just like to do it because it gives a little bit more of a caramelization to the broccoli and some of the other vegetables that I'm about to add. After giving them a couple more minutes to cook down, this is where I'm going to add the mushrooms and the ginger. Here I'm using a lot of mushrooms because I prefer a lot of mushrooms, so you don't have to use this many, or you don't have to use mushrooms at all. You can substitute them with another ingredient. After adding them, give them a stir, that way they can get a little bit more incorporated with all the sauce and the flavors. Lastly, I'm adding the mukimame. After adding the mukimame, place a lid on the pan and give it around another 5 minutes to cook. All in all, total cook time should run you around 20 minutes to a little bit over 20 minutes. You can also serve this with a side of rice to round out the meal a little bit more and also stretch the meal a little bit further. This is a quick, simple recipe that you can make during the work week, and you can also use it for meal prep as well, especially if you serve it with a side of rice. Here's the finished product. Now it's time for a taste test. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time.